Well, welcome to this new video. Um, this will be about the final day of the Rapid World Championships held in Astana, Kazakhstan today. The last day comprised of 5 rounds again. And I already did videos on the first 2 days covering Magnus Carlsen's games. He really dominated the field on those first 2 days, scoring 8.5 points out of 10, so only conceding 3 draws and winning 7 games, totaling to a rating performance of close to 3,000. I think it was maybe even over 3,000, 3,008 or something. And second place was Sergei Karjakin from Russia. He had, I think, 1.5 points less, so 7 out of 10. And this last day actually got interesting in terms of the standings again. So I won't focus on Carlsen's games only, but also show you Karjakin's games. And this both showing both players' games is a bit much, so I won't do this in one video, but in 2 videos. So this is part 1, and please also check for part 2, which is uploaded simultaneously. Alright, so let's start. This 11th round saw Carlsen playing back against Grandmaster Gambitov. I hope Gambitov. The V is missing here. One of the local guys, I think, from Kazakhstan. And you see Magnus being a huge rating favorite here. Okay, let's see what happens. We've got e4, e5 again. He played this throughout the event. And here he didn't went for the Berlin, but for a6. And I really, looking at his games, I really like the games where he goes for mainline really much more than those where he plays the Berlin. But okay, it's nothing to do about this. Okay, knight f6, castles, bishop e7, rook e1. We got just the normal mainline Rouleau-Pass stuff. And here the overwhelming main move is h3. The idea of h3 is to prevent this bishop g4 move, so that white actually can play d4 without having to worry about bishop g4. In the game though, white played d4 immediately, and this is quite an interesting variation, and I'm to be honest surprised that this is not more popular, because it's it's maybe not as good as h3, but it sets like slightly different problems than h3, and black players often don't know this variation too well. So kind of interesting. If you're a white player, want to play the Rouleau-Pass, then maybe look into this line. It's not so well known. Carlsen played bishop g4, which is the correct move to do, putting pressure on this point on d4. And white now played d5, reacting to this pressure. An alternative here is bishop e3, which is also very nicely playable. The tactical point here is that this bishop knight takes e4 is answered with bishop d5, attacking both knights. It's a very useful motif to remember, this kind of unusual fork on the 2 knights. Okay, so this is bishop e3, but white went d5. Black went knight to a5, attacking the bishop. Of course, white wants to keep this important piece, plays bishop c2, and now black plays c6, attacking white's center to gain some space on the queen side. White played h3, and now an important move, and a move that black players really need to know. Black played bishop back to c8 now, all the way back, and it's important to note that the move bishop d7 really is a mistake here, because of the tactical shot knight takes e5, d takes e5, d6, and white regains the piece with a nice advantage. He's got 2 bishops, in an position that is about to open up. The d file is open already, and black still has a somewhat clumsy knight here, so white is much better here. So Carlsen of course knew this, played bishop c8, white grabbed on c6, and now another important move, queen to c7. The idea is that black doesn't want to take with the knight, because the knight on c6 isn't doing so much. This pawn on c3 always hinders the knight on c6, so what he wants to do is exactly what we see in the game. White develops the knight, queen takes, the queen is not bad on c6, putting some pressure on e4 potentially, and controlling the d5 square. So this is what black wants to do. He wants to regroup the knight to b6. Yeah, all normal moves. Bishop e3. Yeah, knight back to d7 to attack the c-pawn. This is a slight weakness here in white's camp. He covers it, and knight to c5. And now we see that black has quite some pressure on e4, and all in all pretty good position. But there's nothing dramatic yet happening. Just developing pieces, and a5. Black tries to play on the queen side. Here white played knight to g5, tickling this bishop, so it retreats. Black doesn't want to give up the bishop pair, and now white played c4. And I think this is really a bad move. The problem is exactly what happens in the game. Black played b4. An alternative would have been to c4, would have been b4, which is interesting. Quite a normal move in these kind of positions, because you want to get rid of the knight and possibly position your bishop on b3 to have a good diagonal. And this is quite interesting for white still. So let's say knight to e6 as a possible answer, and then you might go here. And it's I think maybe around equal. Don't think that there's anything dramatic happening here. At least this looks much better to me than what was played in the game. As mentioned, he played c4. Magnus answered b4. Rook to d1, maybe trying to do something on d6. Queen b6, bishop, and a4. And this exactly is the point. This pawn structure here is a bit vulnerable to pressure on b3. This b3 point now gets real pressure by black, combined with the rook on a3 and the knight on c5. And if you look at white's position, he cannot attack anything in black's camp. Black doesn't have a single weakness. I mean, some people might think, okay, black has a weakness in d6, but it's absolutely impossible to win this pawn. This is comparable to some positions in the Sicilian defense, where this pawn is supposed to be a weakness, but it never gets lost simply because it isn't a weakness. White cannot get any meaningful pressure on this pawn, while black can easily attack the b pawn and also use the a file. We see that it's a position that really plays itself as black, driving away the knight, and he just maneuvers a bit and improves his pieces. Bishop f8, so that you cover h6, allowing maybe to play g6 at some point. Knight h4, okay, you don't get to play knight f5, and all the way back. Rook a8, yeah, and we see that white really doesn't have a plan. He can just sit and wait while black improves his position. Yeah, it's really hard. I looked a bit at this, and besides the c4 move, I'm not quite sure what white really did wrong. But this is kind of a one-way street position, yeah. Black just has all the fun, and white cannot do anything. Yeah, and black has all the time in the world to put pressure. Yeah, and now white is actually forced to take on c5. No big alternative. b3 is not coverable anymore. So he took, and now his dark squares are also weakened. I guess the idea was to transfer the knight to d5. We see this coming. Yeah, needs to cover here first. Yeah, it's really invasion time here on the A file. Yeah, and knight d5. I think after this it's very hard for white to defend this. It was not very comfortable before, but this kind of structure I think really is close to being lost. Black just attacks b3 and has rook a1, rook a2. Just a terrible position. White tries a bit on the king side, but there's really nothing to do. This is also a very nice move, putting the knight offside. It doesn't have a square, and white cannot capture here because of this little trick, winning a piece. So white cannot take, and well, this knight really is a miserable piece now. He played g3 to give this knight a new square, but after this here there's the threat of knight takes b3, and white is in no position to prevent this. So he went king g2, black took, and okay, some desperado move here, and after this white resigned. The queens now come off, and black just wins about every piece on the board. So a very clean victory by Magnus here. And I think really this c4 move, yeah, really wasn't the way to play this, because white really is passive after this. B4 I think was still quite okay. So yeah, everything alright. So for Carlsen's tournament, he won his first game of today, and let's see what Karjakin was doing, the closest pursuer. He played Ivanchuk. Ivanchuk is having his typical kind of up and down tournament, winning fine games and losing some games that no one really understands. So let's see what happens in this game. So Karjakin white playing Ivanchuk, and we got Ruy Lopez again, and Ivanchuk plays the same line that yesterday Mamedyarov played against Carlsen, but a little bit differently, because Karjakin plays rook e1 here. I think Carlsen played d5 immediately. Knight f6. So black is not playing for a quick f5. After d5, I mean, okay, black cannot play f5 anyway with the pawn on d4, but after white plays d5. Okay, so white goes d5. Rook e7, and now this is a difference to Carlsen's game yesterday. Carlsen yesterday in this kind of position, it was similar. He just took on d7 and played this kind of position. Or did he recapture with a knight? I'm not quite sure, but he exchanged the light squared bishop. Karjakin doesn't do so. He just continues to develop and allows Ivanchuk to play bishop g4, which is not terrible for white. Yeah, it's just a different kind of setup. And now black all the way back. He doesn't want to give up his light squared bishop, I guess. And yeah, we have a kind of King's Indian structure. This oops, not the d4 square. This kind of pawns against black's formation, and black has a typical King's Indian position, just a pawn on a6, and white has played the moves rook a1, e1, h3, and bishop on a4, which is, especially bishop on a4, is quite strange. So it's interesting, not so bad for black, I guess. Okay, let's see what happens. He went b4 immediately. Black played knight h5, typical move to prepare f5. Bishop d2, covering this knight so that this diagonal is a bit covered. a5, a3, king h8. Black preparing preparing f5. Typical kind of move to get the king out of harm's way. In c5, white has made quite some progress already on the queen side. So black strikes back with f5, and now white took. I think he didn't want to allow black to set up a position where he might take with the pawn. Black now took with the knight. If he would have taken with the pawn, then the issue is this knight takes e5 idea. This knight is hanging, so he didn't want to allow that. So black took with the piece, and this is quite an interesting position here. White played knight to e4, normal positional move. One thing you need to look at is g4. It looks attractive at first, attacking two pieces, but knight h4 really is a problem for white. This is attacked, and if you take on h4, queen takes. White is just lost here. If he grabs the knight, it's close to checkmate already. Rook to h3, checkmate. So this wasn't the way to go. Cannot play g4. So knight e4, normal looking move. Black exchanged here and entered with his knight. So these two pieces are quite close to white's king. So white decides to get rid of this knight. He just captured it immediately and played rook c1. So we have a position now where black managed to activate his own bishop here. It's not hindered anymore by pawn on e5. So black shouldn't be so bad off here in this position. On the other hand, white has nicely centralized pieces, nice knight on e4, and also this bishop is not bad at all. It controls some squares here and might also retreat to c2 at some point. So about equal, this position. Knight to h4, trying to activate here. It's answered by knight g5, and we have an exchange. And black completes his development. So quite an equal position, I think. But it's not equal like dead equal and a draw. It just means that it's a sort of dynamic equality. Bishop c2. Black wants to keep his bishop, and white centralizes nicely. All pretty normal looking moves. Both sides trying to activate their pieces and improve them. h4 is a very direct move. The ideas could be h5 or maybe knight g5, putting some pressure here on the king side. Black retreated to d7 and knight g5. Rook e8. Everything quite normal. c6. This is very ambitious move. I'm not sure if it's so great, but it's very ambitious. The idea is black needs to capture. The idea was to set up this kind of position, and the idea is to play at some point b6 to free the c pawn. So white has a very dangerous potential pass pawn here. So c6, now that I look at it, seemed like a good idea. It's not terrible for black, but it's a good active idea by white. So Ivanchuk instantly tries to get counterplay on the king side, pushing his g-pawn. And knight d5, also Very logical, attacking this pawn, and black pushes on.
Check.
Queen h5 check. Yeah, and in this position actually Ivanchuk commits a mistake, but it's very difficult to see. I used of course an engine a bit to check this game, and the engine immediately recognizes this, but for a human very difficult. He played bishop h6, which looks perfectly normal. What he should have done is queen to h6, and this is actually completely okay for black. It's still tricky, yeah, this business here with b6 and so on, but black yeah, doesn't need to worry too much in this position. If you look at the game, however, he played bishop here and then knight h4, and you see that this kind of stuff is threatening. So he played king g7, and this looks perfectly okay still. It's not obvious what white should do. What we see now, what happens? He retreated the bishop, which is fine.
Check.
Black exchanged on e1 and played g3. Very typical move to pry open also this diagonal. So if white would take here, he has this check. So what did white do? He played knight f3. But in this position, white actually had a very strong move. He could play here queen g6 check, but this is completely inhumane. You cannot play this, really. A human with limited time cannot play this move. We see what's coming. It's the typical computer line. I show this because it's very nice. Black needs to take, of course. Knight takes. And what is the rook supposed to do now? Let's say he goes here. Then white enters on e8. And this is very hard to play, I think, for a human, because this knight seems terribly stranded on g6 in a way. Okay, black might play bishop here. And what should white play now? In this position, he has the super strong move b6. Because if black captures here, you have b7. And if black takes here, you can exchange and c7. Black would have this move, yeah, c7, but you can play this. Absolutely crazy. And now the c-pawn is unstoppable. If black takes now, the c-pawn just promotes. Yeah, no question, this is not possible for a human to play. So Karjakin did what a normal person should do. He got his knight back, trying to get it to some decent square. Black went rook h8 now, and you see that white's queen is in a bit of a soft spot here. So he put it back to d5. Bishop g4. Yeah, and here white played the move queen to e4. Very normal looking move. He had a good alternative in b6, and after this white might still be better, but it's very complicated to analyze, so I don't want to get into this too deeply. Let's revert to what happened. He played queen e4. Now, oops, I'm not quite sure if he did this. Yeah, Ivanchuk took on f3. White recaptured, and he played bishop g5. And now you see that the move queen h6 can be really a problem. White's king is in a bit of trouble here. So what should white do? He played rook to b1. And Ivanchuk played queen d4. In this position, he could have played, instead of queen d4, he could have played queen to h6. Quite normal looking move. And it's I don't really understand why he didn't play it, to be honest. It just looks like the normal move. Okay, he was down to a couple of seconds. I'm just saying that it looks very normal. It's not a heavy criticism or anything. It's very difficult position, but it looks very normal to sort of threaten this. So what should white do? If you look at this, he could take. Then you give a check here. King moves, and now just capture here. And yeah, black just has a devastating attack here. It's got rook f8 coming, or rook e8 also, taking away the e-file, and then queen to h1 mate. This is very dangerous. King e2, rook f8, just a sample line.
Check.
And now it's basically over. Yeah, black just has a huge attack on the dark squares, and white doesn't have any counterplay. So all in all, this queen h6 just would have won the game. Another line to look at is king f1. No? Oops, I forgot to show this. King f1 here. Then black has the nice move rook e8, taking away the e-file. This kind of stuff. And it's over again. The fun thing is, white also doesn't have any kind of counterplay. And next move it's queen h1 and over. Yeah, just terrible for white. So queen h6 just would have won the game. He played queen d4 though, and white quickly covered f2. King move, queen e4, and we get to an endgame where black is slightly better, simply because he's got this active king and the d-pawn. We see that on the clock times it was like down to a couple of seconds. So black tries to regroup the bishop to b6, which is a very good idea, because or let's say to this diagonal, because it because it blocks the b pawn, black c5 bishop, and you can try to make progress with the d pawn in the meantime. So black is slightly better, but it's not lost for white or something. Black can press though. Yeah, and this is what happened. Rook e3, bishop back. So there's not much progress made, really. Rook c3, rook c4, rook c1. It just goes on a bit.
Check.
And both sides are playing pretty well here. No big issues. So really not much happening. The only thing happening is that Karjakin played very quickly and gained a couple of seconds here, 10-second increment per move. So he had some comfortable time, but Ivanchuk was down to a couple of seconds. And what happens now is pretty amazing. d4, rook c1, to b4, rook d1, and now white won on time. Ivanchuk simply must have forgotten the clock or whatever, so he simply lost on time this position. I didn't see a webcam or anything if there was something particularly awful happening or whatever. He overstepped the time here, so white won. A very strange end of this game, which really should have ended in a draw, or at least not a white win. Yeah, a white win was completely out of the question. So a very lucky win here for Karjakin. If Ivanchuk actually would have won this game, then Magnus would have had a 2.5 point lead in the tournament. But now it was still Karjakin pursuing Carlsen. Very lucky win here. I'm sorry. Okay, so this was the first batch of games, and it took much longer than I actually intended. So I'm going to stop this here. This was round 11 in one video, and see the next video for round 12.